He humiliated her in front of hundreds of people, lights blazing, cameras rolling, laughter echoing around the glass hall of his billion-dollar headquarters. He called her nothing, a mistake, a diversity decoration. And less than 60 seconds later, he watched his phone light up with alerts, his board members stand up in confusion, and the empire he spent decades building quietly, legally, and completely slide into her hands. This is the story of how a billionaire tried to crush a black woman in public, and accidentally handed her everything he had. Let's rewind, because stories like this never start with the humiliation. They start years earlier, quietly, in small apartments and late-night study sessions, long before the cameras and the headlines. Amora Johnson grew up in a tiny two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on the south side of the city. If you stood on the sidewalk below on a hot summer night, you'd sometimes see her light on at 2 a.m. A young black woman with thick curls tied into a scarf, hunched over a second-hand laptop, eyes burning with determination. While other kids were falling asleep to TV shows, Amora fell asleep to the sound of her mother, Denise, whispering prayers over unpaid bills. Her mother worked 2 jobs, home health aide by day, hotel cleaner by night. Her father had left when she was 8, leaving behind an old toolbox, a few dusty photo frames, and a promise that he never kept. "I'll be back when things settle down, baby. You'll see." Things never settled down. Instead, Amora learned quickly that in their world, nothing was guaranteed. Rent could go up, hours could be cut, cars could fail, people could leave. But, as her mother told her again and again, knowledge, skills, those were hers forever. "Books don't walk out on you," Denise would say, rubbing Amora's back while they shared a bowl of instant noodles. "What you put in here," she'd tap her daughter's head. "No one can ever repossess that." Amora believed her. She devoured math textbooks from the library, watched free programming tutorials on the slow, cracked laptop a neighbor had thrown away, and fell in love with patterns, numbers, code, systems. She loved the way computers didn't care what she looked like, where she came from, or if her shoes were worn at the edges. If the code worked, it worked. Period. Her dream was simple and huge at the same time. She wanted out. Not just out of the apartment. Out of survival mode. Out of those whispered, panicked conversations about money. She wanted to build something that could never be taken from her. By the time Amora finished high school, she had won a regional coding competition, earned a full scholarship to a top university, and collected more side jobs than most adults she knew. Freelancing websites, small business apps, data analysis gigs for anyone who would pay. On the day she left for college, her mother hugged her so tightly Amora could barely breathe. "Don't let them make you small," Denise whispered into her ear. "You hear me? You belong anywhere God puts you." Amora nodded, blinking away tears. She didn't know yet how much she would need those words. Fast forward a few years. The city skyline had become a second home to her. Glass towers, rooftop bars, endless traffic, and the constant hum of ambition. After graduating top of her class with a degree in computer science and applied mathematics, she'd landed a job at one of the hottest fintech companies in the country, Lang Global Holdings. If you're picturing a sleek, chrome lobby with screens everywhere, you're exactly right. Lang Global sold itself as the future of finance. Smart investing, AI-driven risk assessment, microloans, crypto portfolios. Their ads were everywhere. "We're democratizing wealth." That was the tagline. And at the very top of it all, Victor Lang. You've probably seen his type on magazine covers or in interviews. Tall, charismatic, with streaks of silver in his perfectly styled hair, an expensive smile, and the particular confidence of a man who hadn't heard the word no in a very long time. To the public, he was a genius, a visionary, a self-made billionaire. To people inside the company, well, it depended on who you asked. Some worshipped him, some feared him, and some, like Amora, watched him with quiet, careful eyes. Amora joined the company as a data scientist. On her first day, she stood in the lobby, clutching her Lang Global badge, staring up at the massive LED screen that showed the stock price, the latest press mentions, and a rotating loop of diversity and inclusion photos, smiling faces of employees of every race and background. She recognized herself in those photos, even before she literally saw herself there. Not yet, but soon. On that first day, she met Maya, a loud, funny Latina woman with curly hair dyed a vibrant teal at the ends. "You must be new," Maya said, popping up beside Amara at the espresso machine. "You have that trying not to look lost face." "I'm Maya, analytics team. Come sit with me at lunch or you'll end up eating in the bathroom like a sad extra in a movie." Amara laughed, relieved. "I'm Amara, data science. And no, I'm not starting my corporate career in the ladies' room." They became fast friends, inside jokes over Slack, shared eye rolls in meetings, late-night debug sessions where they kept each other awake with terrible memes and cheap office coffee. Then there was Lewis, a quiet, kind-hearted senior accountant who'd been at Lang Global almost since the beginning. He had the weary, skeptical look of someone who'd seen too much, but hadn't entirely given up hope. He took a liking to Amora. "You're smart," he told her one day as they rode the elevator down after a late night. "Be careful. Smart people are valuable here, until they become dangerous." "What does that mean?" Amora asked, half joking, half serious. Lewis had given her a long, searching look. "You'll see." For a while, life was good. Amora found herself working on problems that thrilled her, building predictive models, analyzing risk patterns, optimizing credit scoring algorithms. She moved out of her old neighborhood, got her mom into a better apartment and onto a better healthcare plan, and even started sending a little money to her younger cousin for tutoring. Every promotion, every bonus check felt like proof that she was finally breaking the cycle. Then came the project, the one that changed everything. One Tuesday morning, Amara's manager, a middle-aged man named Greg with permanently flushed cheeks and ties that never quite matched, appeared at her desk. "Big meeting," he said, not bothering with a greeting. "Conference room A12. Victor's going to be there." "Victor," Amara repeated, heart skipping. She'd only seen the Billionaire and company town halls and news segments. "Yeah," Greg said. "Top secret rollout. You've been singled out, Johnson." "That's good. So, don't mess it up." Then he walked away, leaving a trail of coffee smell and nerves. In the meeting, the air felt heavier. The room was full of senior people, VPs, directors, lawyers in expensive suits. Victor Lang stood at the head of the table, hands in his pockets, smiling like he already knew he'd won something. When Amara walked in, his eyes landed on her with the quick, assessing look of a man who counted people the way he counted assets. "This is her," he said to Greg, as if Amara couldn't hear. "Yes, sir. This is Amara," Greg said, gesturing awkwardly. Leader on the quantitative modeling." Victor extended a hand. "Impressive resume, Ms. Johnson. MIT, summa cum laude. First in your cohort. And from—" He glanced at her file on the tablet in front of him. "Southridge," Amara answered. "South side of the city." Victor said, with a little nod. "From there to here. That's quite a climb." Something about the way he said there made Amara's shoulders tense just a fraction. She forced a polite smile. "Thank you. I'm excited to be here." Victor grinned wider. "Oh, you will be. Let me tell you what we're building." He called it Project Horizon, a next-generation AI system that would evaluate borrowers, investors, and businesses based on thousands of parameters: social media behavior, banking history, education, even psychological resilience gleaned from online content. Officially, the goal was to expand access to capital for underserved communities and dramatically reduce bias in lending. Unofficially, it was a machine that would decide who deserved opportunity and who didn't, who got the yes and who stayed locked outside the gates. "We're going to transform this industry," Victor said, pacing the room. "No more gut feelings. No more outdated rules. Data-driven fairness. And you," he pointed at Amara, "are going to architect the core engine." A few heads turned away. Some looked impressed. Some looked annoyed. "We need someone who can innovate," Victor continued. "Someone who understands what it's like on the other side, but also has the technical chops to build something revolutionary." He smiled at her like he'd just given her a gift. In that moment, Amara felt pride and unease wrestle inside her chest. On one hand, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Lead engineer on the flagship project. That could change her life. On the other hand, The way he said other side made her feel like a prop. Still, she nodded. I can do it, she said firmly. Good, Victor answered. Because if we get this right, we'll be untouchable. The next months were grueling. Late nights, early mornings, endless spreadsheets, simulations, tests, and whiteboard sessions. Amora built something powerful, a complex, transparent system with fairness constraints baked into the core. She refused to let the model penalize people for things like zip code, name, or non-standard career paths. Her code checked for racial bias, for socioeconomic bias, for the quiet ways systems often punished people who looked like her. She kept telling herself, if I'm going to build something that decides who gets money and who doesn't, I'm not going to let it become another weapon against my community. Maya would bring her takeout and jokes when she stayed late. You know they are going to slap Victor's face on this like he coded it himself, right? Maya said one night, swinging her legs from a desk. Amora smirked. He can have the cameras. I'll take the stock options and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'm the reason it works. Maya tilted her head, studying her. You ever get the feeling they like the story of you a little too much? She asked softly. Like, you're the brochure. Look, we're inclusive. We uplift people from the hood. Buy our app. Amora shrugged, feeling something in her chest twist. Stories are powerful, she said. If they're going to use mine, I'm going to make sure it ends with me free. And then, slowly, the first sign of trouble appeared. It came in lines of code that she didn't write. One evening, Amora was reviewing the latest build. Something didn't look right. The system's approvals for applicants from predominantly black neighborhoods had dropped, slightly, but noticeably. She frowned and scrolled through the logs. There, a new module, a risk adjustment function feeding into her core algorithm. She hadn't implemented that. She clicked into it. The logic was subtle, buried, and labeled innocently as fraud likelihood adjustment. But the weightings it used effectively penalized certain behaviors more common among low-income and minority applicants: frequent job changes, lack of family assets, certain spending patterns. It was bias, hidden, weaponized, wrapped in math. Her heartbeat picked up. She checked the commit history. The changes had been merged by a senior engineer, on request from executive leadership. Executives. She sat back, feeling cold. Had she been naive? Had this been the plan all along? Put a black woman at the front of the fairness revolution, while quietly making the system even more ruthless to people like her? She thought of her mother, of her neighbors, of all the faces she'd seen in the lobby marketing materials. She highlighted the code and started adding comments. This adjustment introduces indirect bias correlated with race and socioeconomic status. It undermines fairness constraints agreed upon in the original design spec. She pushed a request for review and sent a direct message to Greg. We need to talk about the latest changes to Project Horizon. They could be discriminatory. Greg responded quickly. Let's chat tomorrow. Don't worry about it tonight. But she did worry about it that night. Lying awake in her apartment, city lights flickering through the blinds, Amora stared at the ceiling and felt an old fear stay. What if she spoke up and became a problem? What if they pushed her out? What if this is just how things are, and she's the one being unrealistic? Then she remembered her mother's voice. Don't let them make you small. She grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything she'd seen. The meeting with Greg the next day was telling. He sat with his arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. Look, Amora, he said, a little too casually. These changes are coming from higher up. We're trying to protect the company. Fraud is a real issue. I'm aware, she replied calmly, and I'm not against preventing fraud. But this code disproportionately flags people from certain backgrounds. It's going to hurt the exact communities we're claiming to save. Greg sighed. You're overthinking it, he said. Legal signed off. Compliance signed off. Victor's very excited about this. Let's not rock the boat, okay? I wrote the original fairness constraints, Amora said quietly. My name is on the internal documentation. If this goes wrong, I'll be the one they point to. Look, our black lead scientist said it was fair. Greg gave her a strained smile. You're not alone, he said. The company will stand behind you. Something in his voice told her that was a lie. She pushed a little more. I want the concerns documented, Amara insisted. Officially. I'm sending an email to compliance and legal outlining the potential risks and biases. If we adjust, we adjust. But I won't pretend this is fine. Greg's eyes flashed, annoyance, then calculation. Of course, he said. Do whatever you feel you need to. Just be careful with your wording. We don't want to sound accusatory. But that night, when Amara checked the project channel, she saw something that made his stomach drop. She had been quietly removed from the highest-level meeting invites, and the new build was moving forward without her approval. From that point on, the unease didn't leave. She started noticing things she had ignored before. The way some executives praised her in public, then cut her out of key decisions. The way marketing kept requesting just one more photo shoot with her for the website. The way people introduced her at events. This is Amara, one of our success stories. Not one of our lead architects. Not the mind behind Horizon's fairness engine. A story. A prop. And then came the email that would change everything. It arrived late one night while she was reviewing logs for the third time. Subject line: Urgent External Ethics Review. The email was from an independent auditing firm hired to evaluate Project Horizon for potential bias before launch. They wanted her to sign off on a statement that said, in effect, we, the undersigned, confirm that the system has been designed and tested to minimize discriminatory outcomes, particularly with regard to race, gender, and socioeconomic background. Her name was at the top of the list, but the test results attached to the email told a different story. The system approved significantly fewer Black and Latino applicants compared to similar white applicants, thanks to that hidden risk module and a few other adjustments she hadn't noticed yet. It wasn't as blatant as old-school redlining. It was quieter, smarter, harder to prove, but it was there. She stayed at the numbers, her chest tight. If she signed, she'd be complicit. If she refused, she'd be a problem. And in a place like Lang Global, problems got removed. She knew this because she'd heard rumors. Whispers in the break room about a former VP who tried to raise concerns about accounting irregularities. He'd just disappeared, Lewis had said once, his voice low. Not like in a movie. Just out. Non-disclosure agreement. Pursuing other opportunities. Amara closed her eyes. What would Mom say? She knew. So she did something that terrified her. She refused. But she didn't do it loudly. Not yet. She wrote a careful, detailed response to the auditing firm and copied internal legal. I cannot, in good conscience, sign this statement as written. Based on the current build, there are measurable disparities in outcomes correlated with race and socioeconomic status. I am happy to walk through the data and propose adjustments to reduce these disparities before launch. She hit send and sat very still. The next morning, everything felt different. People were a little quieter around her. Greg barely looked her in the eye. An internal memo went out announcing that Project Horizon's public launch would be unveiled at a massive investor summit in 3 weeks, and it would be presented by none other than Victor Lang, including a special segment highlighting our commitment to equity and inclusion, the memo said, with Amara as the face, of course. 2 days later, Lewis knocked gently on her office door. Got a minute? He asked. She nodded, grateful to see a friendly face. He closed the door behind him and sat down, looking around like he was afraid of being watched. I saw your email, he said quietly. Amara blinked. How? I have access, he replied, tapping the side of his nose. Long story. Not the point. The point is, you're right to be worried. He pulled out a folder from his bag and placed it on her desk. These are internal projections for Horizon's impact over the next 3 years, he said. Publicly, we're saying it will expand access to credit. Internally, some people are very excited about how much we'll save by denying high-risk applicants. And I don't think I need to tell you which neighborhoods are being labeled high-risk. He opened the folder. Charts, graphs, heat maps, and in all of them, citing communities, the kind she grew up in, glowed like danger zones. Amara felt her throat tighten. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because I'm tired, Lewis said simply. I've convinced myself for years that the good we do balances the bad. That if we just hire more people like you, things will change from the inside. But I've watched this company find new ways to protect its own interests every time. And when someone tries to push back, they disappear," Amara finished. Lewis nodded. "But you," he said, leaning forward, "you have something no one else had." "What?" she asked. "Leverage. Here's something you need to know about Amara." She didn't just code. She read contracts, licensing agreements, patent filings. Because from the moment she started building valuable things, she promised herself she would never be in a position where someone could just take her work and toss her aside. Months earlier, when Project Horizon was first being formalized, legal had sent her a thick contract to sign. It had looked standard at first, but Amara wasn't the kind of person who just clicked accept. She'd read every line, every clause, every footnote, and she'd negotiated. "No one at your level negotiates these," Greg had said, half amused, half annoyed when she sent back red lines. "Maybe they should," she'd replied. One clause, in particular, had bothered her. It essentially said all intellectual property she developed in relation to Horizon would belong to Lang Global. Standard, yes, but far-reaching. So she proposed a modification. She argued that because she had developed some of the core fairness algorithms years before joining Lang Global, basic prototypes she'd used in graduate projects and freelance work, she wanted to retain ownership of her pre-existing IP and only grant Lang Global an exclusive license to use it as long as certain conditions were met. "It's a formality," she had said sweetly to the company's lawyer on the call. "Just to reflect reality. The company didn't pay for my MIT degree or my unpaid internships. I came in with tools. You're licensing those tools for this specific use." The lawyer had resisted. "This is unusual," he'd said. "But not unreasonable," Amara had replied. "Here's a compromise." In the end, after a few back and forths and the pressure of needing to move the project forward quickly, they'd agreed. The final contract contained a dense, easily overlooked clause stating that the company is granted an exclusive, revocable license to utilize the Fairlens algorithm suite, the Fairlens IP, owned by the employee, for the purpose of developing and operating the Project Horizon platform, subject to ongoing adherence to the fair use and anti-discrimination standards outlined in Appendix B. In the event of material breach of said standards, as determined by an independent review or regulatory finding, the employee reserves the right to revoke the license upon written notice, at which point companies shall immediately cease all use of the Fairlens IP. At the time, it had felt like a distant safety net. Now, looking at Lewis's folder, she realized what he meant by leverage. Without her Fairlens algorithms, Horizon wouldn't just be less ethical. It wouldn't exist. It was the core engine. Everything else was built on top of it. If the company violated the anti-discrimination standards in that appendix, she had a legal path to pull the plug. But who would ever enforce that? She said as much to Lewis. "These clauses look great on paper," she said, "but they are nothing against a company this big. They have lawyers, lobbyists, PR. I'm just one person." Lewis gave her a small, almost sad smile. "What if you weren't alone?" he asked. "This is the part where the story stops being about one woman quietly trying not to get crushed and starts becoming a strategy. Because up until now, Amara had been reacting. Now, she began to plan. She started doing what you might do if you realized the people above you were playing dirty with your work and your name. She started documenting everything. Emails, Slack messages, meeting notes, changes in code, statistical outputs showing biased outcomes, internal presentations that contradicted public statements. She bought a small, legal voice recorder and, after consulting with an outside lawyer on confidentiality rules, carried it into certain meetings where she knew they wouldn't hold back. She scheduled a consultation with an employment attorney, far away from Lang Global's usual circles, paid in cash, and laid everything out. The lawyer, a black woman in her 50s named Carla, listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious as the story unfolded. When Amara finished, Carla sat back and exhaled slowly. "They are using your face as a shield," she said. "They want you front and center when this launches, so if anyone raises questions about bias, they can say, 'How dare you? Look at our lead architect.'" "I know," Amara said, "but what can I actually do?" Carla tapped the contract clause Amara had highlighted. This, she said, you have more power than you think. But you have to be willing to use it. And once you do, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Are you ready for that? Amara thought of her mother, still cleaning hotel rooms so other people could sleep in crisp sheets. She thought of her old neighborhood, of kids who would be denied loans by a system that pretended to be fair. No, she admitted. I'm not ready, but I'm more tired of being scared than I am of fighting. Carla nodded, a glint of approval in her eyes. Good, she said. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next 2 weeks, as Lang Global ramped up preparations for the Investor Summit, Amara moved through the office like nothing was wrong. She attended meetings. She gave status updates. She smiled in hallways and nodded in rehearsals for the big presentation. But behind that calm, she was weaving something very precise. She worked with Carla to file preliminary confidential complaints with regulators about potential algorithmic discrimination, without naming the company yet, but enough to establish a record. She compiled a dossier of evidence, data, contracts, internal communications, and stored copies securely off-site. She also did something risky. She reached out to a journalist. Not just any journalist. A tech and finance investigative reporter known for exposing corporate scandals, who also happened to be a black woman tired of innovation being used as an excuse to hurt her community. They met in a crowded cafe across town, sitting in the corner with their phones turned off. If what you're saying is true, the journalist, Nia, said after hearing the whole story, this could be huge. But you know they'll come for you, right? Legally. Publicly. I know, Amara replied. That's why I'm not asking you to publish anything yet. I'm asking you to be ready. Nia raised an eyebrow. Ready for what? For the moment it all goes public, Amara said. On my terms. Meanwhile, inside Lang Global, Victor was preparing for his big moment. The Investor Summit was everything to him. It wasn't just about Horizon. It was about legacy. He wanted headlines. Applause. Another cover story about how he disrupted the financial industry once again. His media team crafted the narrative. The visionary billionaire. The revolutionary AI. The inspiring black woman from the inner city who helped him give back. They wrote speeches where he talked about lifting people up and healing systemic inequality, complete with photos of Amara looking determined in front of giant screens of data. Every time she saw a mock-up, rage simmered beneath her ribs. You know that feeling. When you see someone using your existence as a costume. If you've ever felt that, you know exactly what was building inside her. The first time Victor's mask slipped around her, it was subtle. They were in a rehearsal for the summit. The room was full of executives and PR people. Amara stood beside Victor on stage, going over their joint segment. And then, Victor said, turning to her with that practiced smile, Amara will talk about how her experiences growing up in a disadvantaged community inspired the fairness architecture behind Horizon. He looked at her. Make sure you really lean into that, he added. The struggle, the grit. People eat that up. The way he said people made his stomach turn. Those experiences did shape my perspective, she said carefully. But I'm here because of my expertise, not just my background. Victor chuckled, as if she'd said something adorably naive. Of course, he said. We all know you're brilliant. But storytelling is about emotion. You are living proof that the system works. He clapped her shoulder with a little too much familiarity. Besides, he added, voice dropping just enough that only she could hear, you should be grateful. A few years ago, someone like you wouldn't even be in this room. Someone like you. The words hit her like a slap. She swallowed, forced her face to remain neutral, and stepped back. Inside, a switch flipped. She stopped hoping he'd do the right thing. She stopped believing she could fix things quietly. From that moment on, she wasn't just documenting. She was preparing. The day of the summit arrived like a storm. You know those glossy events you see in photos? Stage lights, giant logos, people in expensive suits holding champagne glasses and tiny plates of food? This was that. Turned up to 11. The main hall of Lang Global's headquarters had been transformed into a futuristic theater, floor-to-ceiling screens, a polished stage, rows of seats filled with investors, journalists, influencers, and company staff. Cameras were set up for a global live stream. Hashtags were already trending. Backstage, the air buzzed with adrenaline. Amara stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the simple, elegant blazer she'd chosen. Her natural curls framed her face. She wore minimal jewelry, a quiet defiance in a room full of flash. Maya appeared behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You okay?" Maya asked. "No," Amara said honestly, "but I'm ready." Maya studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good," she said, "because I've got your back. Whatever happens out there." Amara smiled faintly. "Thank you." Lewis passed by a few minutes later, giving her a barely perceptible nod. He knew. Nia knew. Carla knew. A small network of people stood ready, like a circuit waiting for a switch to be flipped. Victor, on the other hand, was glowing. He moved backstage like a king on Coronation Day, laughing with board members, adjusting his cufflinks, rehearsing sound bites with PR staff. When he reached Amara, he looked her up and down. "You look perfect," he said. "Exactly the image we want. You're going to inspire a lot of people today." She forced a polite smile. "We'll see," she replied. He didn't catch the double meaning. The program began. First came the usual corporate fluff, revenue graphs, growth projections, slick videos showing happy customers, voiceovers about transformation and the future. Then, at last, the lights shifted. A deep blue washed over the stage. A voice announced, "Please welcome founder and CEO of Lang Global, Victor Lang." The room erupted in applause as Victor walked out, waving, smiling, soaking it in. Watching from offstage, Amara felt her pulse in her throat. He launched into his speech, talking about his humble beginnings, polished, filtered, his vision, his belief in technology as a force for good. People nodded, eyes shining. Then came the transition. "And now," Victor said, gesturing toward the wings, "I want to introduce someone very special. Someone who represents exactly what Lang Global stands for." He looked toward Amara. "When we started Project Horizon," he continued, "I knew we needed a new kind of voice at the table. Not just Ivy League credentials, but real, lived experience. Someone who understood what it meant to be on the wrong side of the financial system. Someone who could help us build a tool that would finally level the playing field." He smiled that big, camera-ready smile. "Meet Amara Johnson. She grew up in one of the toughest neighborhoods in this city. No money, no connections, just grit and brainpower. And now, she's our lead architect for Horizon's fairness engine. She's proof that when you work hard, anything is possible." The audience clapped as Amara stepped onto the stage. Her heels clicked against the polished floor. The lights were blinding. For a moment, everything felt far away. The crowd, the cameras, even Victor beside her. She took her place next to him, fixed her gaze on the crowd, and said, "Thank you, Victor." He nodded, stepping back just a bit, letting her stand in the spotlight. "Amara is going to tell you," he said, "how Project Horizon is going to change everything for people who grew up like her." Then he moved to the side of the stage, folding his arms, watching, waiting for her to deliver the script they'd written. But that wasn't the script she had in her hand. You can probably feel it, can't you? That moment when a story hangs on a breath. She could feel it too. Amara took a slow breath, feeling the cool metal of the clicker in her hand. On the screen behind her, the first slide of the official presentation appeared, a photo of her as a child, from a family picture she'd never consented to be used this way, overlaid with the words, "From poverty to power, a new era of fair finance." She glanced at it, then looked back at the audience. "My name is Amara Johnson," she began, voice steady. "And yes, I did grow up in a neighborhood where most people never got approved for loans, where banks closed branches and opened payday lending shops instead, where people worked twice as hard for half the stability." A murmur of sympathetic nods rippled through the audience. Victor smiled faintly off to the side. "And yes," she continued, "I worked very hard to get from there to here. I studied. I coded. I sacrificed. My mother cleaned hotel rooms so I could afford test prep books. I owe her everything." Her throat tightened just a little, but she kept going. "So when I was asked to lead the fairness architecture for Project Horizon," she said, "I felt proud. I thought, finally, I get to help build something that won't treat people like me as a risk to be avoided. She clicked the remote. On the screen, instead of the approved slide deck, a different image appeared. A simple graph, 3 bars labeled white applicants, black applicants, and Latino applicants. The bars represented approval rates and internal tests. The room shifted. Phones came out. Eyebrows furrowed. Victor's smile faltered. But as I worked on this project, Amara said, her voice gaining strength, I discovered something. She clicked again. A zoomed-in view showed the internal label, Horizon version 3.21, Fraud Adjustment Module Outcomes. I discovered that while we spoke about fairness in public, she continued, in private, changes were being made that systematically reduced approvals for people from neighborhoods like mine. Changes that were written into code, labeled as risk and fraud, but in practice, they functioned as modern redlining. A murmur spread through the crowd, louder now. Victor stepped forward, forcing a laugh. Amara, he said lightly, I think there's been a misunderstanding. These are internal test scenarios, not final. She turned to him, meeting his eyes. There's no misunderstanding, she said quietly, the microphone picking up every word. I wrote the original fairness constraints. I documented my objections when they were undermined. I refused to sign off on claims that this system was anti-discriminatory. And I have the emails, code commits, and internal memos to prove it. Silence fell like a weight. Somewhere in the middle rows, someone gasped. Lewis, seated with the finance team, watched with his heart pounding. Maya clutched the edge of his seat, eyes wide. Victor's face tightened, anger flickering beneath his polished exterior. This is not the time or place, he began. It's exactly the time and place, Amara interrupted, turning back to the audience. Because right now, you are being asked to invest in and endorse a product that will decide who gets access to opportunity. And you deserve to know what it's really doing. She clicked again. On the screen appeared excerpts from internal documents, carefully redacted to protect certain employees, but highlighting phrases like, projected reduction in capital exposure due to high-risk demographic filters. Brand messaging must emphasize fairness to mitigate regulatory scrutiny. A low, angry rumble passed through the room. Victor's composure shattered. He stepped toward her, voice rising. Turn that off. He snapped to the tech team at the back. Cut the feed. But the feed didn't cut. Because Lewis, who had quietly befriended a few key AV techs over the years and shown them exactly what was at stake, had already arranged for a backup system. The slides were mirrored to a secure stream Nia was watching from a nearby room, recording everything. On social media, clips were already being clipped, posted, shared. If you think this is just a technical disagreement, Amara said, addressing the audience like Victor wasn't even there. Let me make it clear. This is about a company using the face and story of a black woman from a poor neighborhood to sell a product that, in its current configuration, would deny people like her a fair chance. Her voice didn't shake. This is about pretending to fix a problem while quietly profiting from it. Victor moved closer, his voice hard. You are out of line, he hissed. You have no idea what you're talking about. You are here because I gave you. And there it was. He didn't mean to say it into the microphone, but he did. I gave you a job, he spat. I put you on this stage. Without me, you'd still be some nobody from the projects. Don't forget that. The words echoed through the hall. You could feel the entire room recoil. Cameras zoomed in. Every mask he'd ever worn slipped at once. Amara looked at him calmly. There it is, she said softly. The humiliation came next, but not the way he expected, because he thought she would be the one humiliated, the ungrateful employee who had lost control. Instead, the world had just watched a billionaire tell a black woman on a public stage that she should be grateful he rescued her from being a nobody. In 4K. Live. Now, remember that contract clause. The one about the Fairlands IP license being revocable in the event of discriminatory use? This was the moment it was designed for. Amara reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a folded document. As of this morning, she said, unfolding it slowly, I have delivered written notice to Lang Global of my decision to revoke their license to use the Fairlands algorithm suite. She held it up. This decision was made after consulting legal counsel and gathering extensive evidence that the system is being deployed in a way that violates the anti-discrimination standards we agreed on. Victor's face went pale. "You can't do that," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. We do not own the Fairlands IP," someone else said. All eyes turned. It was one of the board members, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a measured voice. She stood up from her seat. "As you know, Victor," she continued, "the board reviewed the contracts when we approved Project Horizon. The company's rights to that core algorithm are, in fact, contingent upon meeting certain ethical benchmarks. If Ms. Johnson has revoked the license per the agreement, we may no longer legally use Horizon in its current form." Victor stared at her, stunned. "You're taking his side," he demanded. "I am taking the side of legal reality," the board member replied coolly, "and of protecting this company from a massive regulatory and reputational disaster." She turned to Amora. "Ms. Johnson," she said, "do you have evidence to support your allegations?" Amora met her gaze. "Yes," she said. "I've already shared a packet with the full board and with external counsel, and with certain regulatory bodies." Phones buzzed as board members checked their email. Victor's own phone lit up on stage. He glanced at it. Multiple notifications. Urgent, regulatory inquiry received. From General Counsel, we need to talk now. From PR, live stream going viral. #Lang exposed as trending. His kingdom was catching fire in real time. This is the part where, in a movie, security might drag the heroine off stage. But this wasn't a movie. This was contract law, public perception, and billions of dollars on the line. The board couldn't afford to be seen silencing a whistleblower, especially not when everything was being recorded, and when she held the legal keys to their flagship product. So instead, something else happened. The board chair, an older man who had mostly stayed silent until now, stood up slowly. "Victor," he said, voice booming in the hushed hall, "I think it's best if you step off stage." Victor let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're kidding," he said. "This is my company." "For now," the chair replied. "But our duty is to the shareholders and the law, not your ego. We will convene an emergency session after this. In the meantime, you are making this worse." The cameras caught every word. For a few long seconds, Victor looked around the room, at the board, at the audience, at the phones capturing his every twitch. Then, slowly, he stepped back. Not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. Humiliation burned in his face. He had walked onto this stage as an untouchable billionaire. Now, he stood there like a man watching his own public trial begin. You remember the title of this story? Billionaire publicly humiliates black woman. Seconds later, she takes his whole empire. The humiliation had happened. He tried to put her in her place. But the taking his empire part, that started now. Because even though Amara had just pulled the plug on Horizon, she hadn't come just to destroy. She had come with an alternative. She turned back to the audience. "I want to be very clear," she said. "I'm not here to burn everything down. I'm here to stop harm and build something better." She clicked her remote again. A new slide appeared. Fairground, an independent ethical finance initiative. The title read. Below it, a simple, powerful mission statement. Financial tools built with transparency, community oversight, and measurable fairness. "I have spent the last several months," Amara continued, "working with a team of independent engineers, community leaders, and legal experts to design a structure where tools like Fairlands can be deployed under strict ethical oversight, outside the control of any single corporation." She let that sink in. "This company wanted to own my work entirely," she said. "Instead, I set it up under a non-profit foundation with a for-profit arm, Fairground Labs, that I control. We already have interest from investors who care about long-term, sustainable, just returns, not short-term exploitation." She glanced at the rows of investors and analysts. Some looked troubled. Some looked intrigued. "You came here today because you believe in the power of technology to transform finance," Amara said. "You're not wrong. But you have a choice about how that power is used. You can support a system that quietly encodes the same old inequities." She nodded toward the Lang Global logo on the giant screen. Or you can support one that is transparent, accountable, and led by people who actually understand the communities most affected. Victor stepped forward again, voice hoarse. You're trying to steal this from me, he said. You're using my platform, my investors, your platform, she repeated slowly. Let's talk about that. She clicked. An image appeared on screen, a collage of Lang Global's own marketing materials, banners with her face, quotes they'd attributed to her, stats about how much good they were doing. You used my story to build this platform, she said. You asked me to bear my childhood, my mother's sacrifices, my community's pain, so you could sell your product. So when I stand here and tell the whole story, that's not theft. That's reclamation. The room broke into spontaneous applause. It wasn't everyone. Some remained still, processing, calculating. But the sound was real. For the first time, Victor looked small. In the hours that followed, things moved fast. The summit was effectively hijacked, but no one could pretend it hadn't happened. The live stream had thousands of viewers. Clips were spreading across social media with captions like, "She just destroyed algorithmic racism live on stage." Billionaire's fair AI exposed by its own black lead architect. Regulators, alerted by Carla and now pushed by public pressure, announced inquiries into Lang Global's lending algorithms. Journalists swarmed the building. Nia released a detailed article she'd been preparing, complete with leaked documents and interviews, anonymous where necessary, that backed up Amara's claims. And inside the building, the board went to war. They convened an emergency meeting that lasted hours. Employees whispered in hallways. Some cried. Some celebrated quietly. Some updated their resumes. By the end of the day, a statement went out. Lang Global takes allegations of discriminatory practices extremely seriously. Effective immediately, the board has placed CEO Victor Lang on indefinite administrative leave, pending an independent investigation. You can guess how that played. Stock prices wobbled. Trust eroded. But that wasn't the end. Because remember, this story isn't just about him falling. It's about her rising. Over the next few weeks, Amara's life turned upside down. She moved from being an internal employee to a public figure almost overnight. Some people called her a hero. Others called her a troublemaker. She received threats. She received flowers. She received offers from other companies, from investors, from organizations wanting her to speak. She turned most of them down. Instead, she focused on building Fairground. With Carla's guidance, Lewis's financial expertise, Maya's operations skills, and a small but fierce team of engineers, including a few who left Lang Global in protest, she turned her idea into a functioning reality. Fairground's core was simple. Transparent algorithms. All decision-making code would be subject to public audits and community oversight. Community ownership, a portion of profits and control, would be reserved for representatives from the communities most impacted. Independent ethics board, including experts in civil rights, technology, and finance, with the power to veto deployments that failed fairness tests. Investors who cared more about headlines than justice walked away. But others stayed, and new ones came. Quietly powerful ones, who saw both the moral and financial value in rebuilding trust in finance. Within a year, Fairground had pilot programs with community banks and credit unions. They were smaller than Lang Global's reach, but their impact was real. Approval rates for qualified applicants in historically excluded neighborhoods went up. Default rates stayed reasonable. People who had been shut out finally got a yes. In interviews, Amara was calm, measured. "I didn't take down Lang Global," she would say. "I just told the truth. The systems they built collapsed under the weight of that truth." But you and I know that's only part of it. Because by revoking the license to Fairlands, she hadn't just embarrassed a billionaire. She had gutted his crown jewel. Lang Global was forced to scrap Horizon's launch entirely. They tried to rebuild with a different engine, but regulators were watching. Trust was broken. Competitors moved in. The board, facing lawsuits and ongoing investigations, eventually ousted Victor permanently. And here's the twist. As part of a settlement to avoid a drawn-out legal and PR disaster, Lang Global agreed to something almost unthinkable. They transferred a significant portfolio of their inclusive finance assets, community outreach programs, a nascent microloan subsidiary, and certain IP rights to an independent entity. That entity, Fairground Foundation, the very structure Maura had set up. In a single stroke, she went from being an employee they tried to use to the head of an organization that now controlled some of the most ethically valuable parts of what Lang Global had tried to market as its conscience. Did she literally own every asset Lang Global had? No, but practically. She had taken the heart of what made his empire look human and turned it into something actually humane. His empire's soul was now hers. And what about Victor? The last time Amora saw him in person, it was months later, at a closed-door mediation session. He looked older. The shine was gone from his eyes. His hair, once meticulously groomed, had more gray. As the lawyers argued over details, he studied Amora. "I underestimated you," he said quietly during a break, when their counsel stepped out. Amora turned to him. "You didn't underestimate me," she replied. "You misjudged me. You saw my skin and my story and assumed I'd be so grateful for your approval that I'd ignore what you were doing." He flinched slightly. "You ruined me," he said. "No," she said softly. "You did that yourself. I just refused to help you hide it." He looked away. For the first time, she felt, not pity, exactly, but distance. He was no longer a towering figure in her life, just a man who had believed his money made him untouchable. She walked out of that room lighter, not because he had fallen, because she had chosen not to let his view of her define her. A year later, on the anniversary of the summit, Amora stood on a different stage. This time, it wasn't a corporate lobby filled with investors. It was a remodeled community center in her old neighborhood. The walls were freshly painted. The chairs were filled with families, young entrepreneurs, students, and local leaders. Behind her, a screen showed stories of people who had gotten funding through Fairgrounds programs, small business owners, first-time homeowners, students, and yes, a few kids who reminded her of herself at that old kitchen table. Her mother sat in the front row, tears in her eyes, wearing a dress Amora had insisted on buying for her. When the applause died down, Amora spoke. "A year ago," she said, "I stood on a stage in a different building, in a different part of this city, and told the truth about a system that was willing to use my face while harming people who looked like me." She paused, scanning the room. "Today, I stand here to tell a different truth. When we refuse to be props in someone else's story, when we insist on being authors instead, everything changes." She smiled. "They tried to make me small," she said. "But the moment I stopped apologizing for taking up space, my world got bigger. And so did yours." She looked at her mother. "Mom," she said, voice breaking just a little, "this is for you. For every night you came home exhausted and still asked me about my homework. For every time you told me I belonged in rooms they pretended weren't built for me." Her mother's shoulders shook with silent sobs. The audience rose to their feet. "And you. Yeah, you watching this, listening to this story right now. Maybe you've never faced a billionaire on a stage. Maybe your boss isn't secretly rewriting code to hurt your community. But I'd bet there's a place in your life where someone is underestimating you, where someone is benefiting from your work, your ideas, your heart, while making you feel smaller than you are. Maybe it's a job that calls you family but treats you like you're replaceable. Maybe it's a relationship where your dreams come second. Maybe it's a system that says you should be grateful for scraps while others feast. Here's the truth Amora's story reminds us of. You are not just a story they get to tell. You are the storyteller. And when you start acting like it, when you write things down, protect your value, refuse to sign off on harm, and surround yourself with people who see your worth, the empires built on your silence start to crumble. If you believe integrity matters more than image, if you believe no one should have to trade their dignity for opportunity, if you've ever felt small in a room that was using you to look big, you're not alone, and you're not powerless. If this story hit something in you, let it sit. Think about where in your life you need to stop being grateful for being allowed in the room, and start asking, who owns the story, hey? Who owns the work? Who owns the impact? And if you want more stories like this, stories about justice, about courage, about people who refuse to stay in the place the world assigned them, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes, all it takes is one story, told at the right time, to remind someone. You don't have to accept humiliation to survive. You can turn it into the moment you take everything back.